October 5th, 2025. Evening darkness falling over western Russia. In the next 6 hours, Ukraine would prove that $500,000 worth of drones could cripple a $270 million air defense system, and then deliver 540 kilograms of precision-guided explosives straight into the heart of Russia's southern logistics network. 40,000 people would lose power in the following minutes. But the real target wasn't civilians. It was the electrical artery feeding Russia's 20th Guards Combined Arms Army, the unit responsible for some of the bloodiest operations in Mariupol and the Donbass. Russian air defense commanders thought they were winning. They had no idea they were being hunted. This is the untold story of how Ukraine's October 5th strike on Belgorod became a masterclass in modern deception warfare, where intelligence defeats raw firepower, and a single thermal power plant became the linchpin that could paralyze an entire army. Earlier that day, Russian Governor Vyacheslav Gladkov had issued routine updates to Belgorod residents. The city, just 90 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, had grown accustomed to air raid warnings. But this night would be different. What Russia didn't know, Ukrainian military intelligence had spent weeks analyzing Belgorod's defensive posture. They'd identified the Belgorod thermal power station, officially designated Belgorodskaya GRES, as what U.S. military analysts call a systemic choke point. This wasn't some random infrastructure target. This single facility powered the radar installations of S-300 and S-400 air defense batteries across Belgorod Oblast, encrypted communication networks in hardened Russian command bunkers, the electrical signaling systems controlling the rail network, moving ammunition, fuel, and troops to the Donbass front. The 20th Guards Combined Arms Army's main supply and command infrastructure. Destroy this plant, and you don't just turn off lights. You blind an army's eyes, sever its communications, and cripple its legs. But Ukrainian planners knew Belgorod's defenses were fortress-level. Pantsir S-1 close-range systems, Tor M2 medium-range batteries, and somewhere, hidden and silent, at least one S-400 long-range system, Russia's most advanced air defense platform. To hit this target, Ukraine needed to do more than just fire missiles. They needed to make Russia's own defenses betray themselves. The plan was elegant in its brutality. Force the S-400 to reveal itself, then strike when it was vulnerable. Ukrainian war planners designed a three-phase operation. Phase 1. Launch a massive drone swarm to overwhelm Russian air defenses and force them to commit resources. Phase 2. Fire a first HIMARS salvo specifically designed to be intercepted, but whose real purpose was electronic warfare. Phase 3. Strike the real target while Russian defenses were blind and reloading. What made this strategy brilliant wasn't the firepower, it was the psychology. Every Russian air defense operator is trained to engage ballistic threats immediately. When you see HIMARS rockets diving at your position, you don't have time to ask questions. You engage. And that's exactly what Ukraine was counting on. As evening darkness settled over Belgorod Oblast, Ukrainian forces initiated the largest coordinated drone operation in weeks. More than 200 unmanned platforms surged across the border, targeting multiple Russian regions simultaneously: Kursk, Bryansk, Belgorod, and others. These weren't your typical FPV racing drones. These were purpose-built long-range kamikaze platforms, UJ-26 Bober extended-range units, capable of carrying approximately 20 kilograms of explosives over 800 kilometers. AQ-400 Scythe drones, with warheads up to 32 kilograms and ranges exceeding 750 kilometers. Various smaller tactical drones for saturation. Russian air defense networks lit up across the western military districts. Warning consoles erupted simultaneously. This was coordinated hell arriving from multiple vectors at once. Pantsir S-1 systems spun their gun mounts skyward. Tor M2 batteries activated their engagement radars. The night sky became a strobing hellscape of tracer fire and missile contrails. Russian operators started logging kills. 1 drone down, 3 down, 7 down. Every system responding. Every threat being neutralized. Victory after victory scrolling up the tactical displays. But here's what Russian commanders didn't understand. These drones weren't trying to hit anything specific. This was approximately $500,000 worth of flying bait designed for one purpose: to drown Russia's expensive defensive systems in targets, burn through their missile magazines, lock their radars in every direction, and most importantly, make them commit their hidden assets. Because somewhere in that defensive network was the crown jewel, the S-400 battery that Russia had kept silent and concealed specifically for moments of extreme threat. And Ukraine was about to make it break radio silence. North of Kharkiv, concealed behind residential blocks, 2 M142 HIMARS launchers had been positioned in carefully chosen firing locations. Ukrainian fire control officers punched coordinates into their computers. Not the power plant coordinates. Not yet. The first salvo had a different mission entirely. At approximately 1830 hours local time, 6 M31A1 GMLRS guided rockets erupted from their tubes and arced toward Russian territory. Each rocket, 90 kilograms of high explosive payload. Total destructive power, 540 kilograms. But these weren't meant to destroy anything. These were sensor platforms in disguise. The M31 GMLRS rockets crossed into Russian airspace, climbing to near space altitudes before beginning their terminal dive. Speed, better than Mach 2.5. Trajectory, ballistic, nearly vertical. Russian early warning radar operators watched their screens with growing alarm. 6 new contacts. These weren't crawling along at drone speed. These were screaming down from the upper atmosphere. Someone in the Russian command center shouted the classification. Ballistic contacts. HIMARS rockets. The Russian commander faced an impossible decision with seconds to act. Ballistic threats diving at your defensive network demand immediate engagement. The cost of hesitation could be catastrophic. He gave the order that Ukraine had been waiting for. Somewhere in Belgorod Oblast, a massive 92 N6E Gravestone radar array that had remained electronically silent suddenly pulsed to maximum power. The S-400, Russia's most expensive, most capable defensive asset within 200 kilometers, locked onto all 6 incoming rockets with targeting solutions. Within heartbeats, 48 N6DM interceptor missiles roared upward at Mach 6, each worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The interceptors and the HIMARS rockets met in the upper atmosphere. 6 brilliant detonations bloomed against the darkening sky. A Russian operator's voice cut through the tension. Clean sweep. All ballistic contacts destroyed. 6 for 6. Cheers erupted in the Russian command center. Relief flooded the room. They just defeated what appeared to be a sophisticated HIMARS strike. Every system had performed flawlessly. Victory. But 340 kilometers away, in a reinforced Ukrainian command bunker, electronic warfare officers were practically glowing. The most critical phase had just executed perfectly. Those 6 HIMARS rockets, $168,000 each, over $1 million total, weren't attack munitions. They were the world's fastest, most expensive electronic intelligence collectors ever conceived. Their job wasn't destruction. Their job was forcing that hidden S-400 to break radio silence, launch interceptors, and broadcast its exact position and electronic signature to Ukrainian listening posts. A Ukrainian EW officer stabbed his finger at a brilliant icon on his display. Target acquired. S-400 positional data locked. Operating frequency captured. Signal strength measured. Radar signature confirmed. He grabbed his communications headset. Second battery, you're cleared hot. Send the real package. What the Russians celebrated as victory was actually a brutal trap snapping shut. Here's what makes this operation so sophisticated. Every radar emission is a fingerprint. Every missile launch is a GPS coordinate. The S-400's massive radar array, operating at full power to track 6 simultaneous ballistic threats, had just broadcast its exact location, operating frequencies, and power levels to every Ukrainian electronic surveillance asset in range. But Ukraine gained something even more valuable: timing data. The S-400 has a critical vulnerability window. After engaging multiple targets at maximum capacity, the system enters a recalibration and reload sequence. During this window, lasting approximately 38 to 45 seconds, the battery is functionally blind and defenseless. Ukrainian intelligence had timed this down to the heartbeat. The S-400's electronic fingerprint and GPS coordinates were transmitted instantly to a second HIMARS battery positioned at a completely different firing point. UJ-26. Bober kamikaze drones already vectoring toward the battery's coordinates. Ukrainian artillery targeting computers. Command headquarters for battle damage assessment preparation. The real killing blow was about to launch, and Russian commanders had no idea what was coming. Different location, different HIMARS crew. They'd been sitting in absolute silence, waiting for this exact fire mission. The encrypted order arrived with updated coordinates. not the S-400 battery. That was being handled by the drones. This salvo had the primary objective: 6-round salvo. New target coordinates: the Belgorod thermal power station itself. Specifically the transformer complex and gas turbine building, the electrical heart of the facility. The crew verified the coordinates 3 times. This wasn't just any strike. This was the reason for the entire operation. At 18:51 hours, the second HIMARS battery sent 6 M31A1 rockets screaming toward Russian territory. Multiple things were happening simultaneously, and this is where Ukrainian planning becomes brilliant. At the S-400 position, the battery was in its reload and recalibration cycle. The massive Gravestone radar was temporarily offline, going through its post-engagement diagnostic sequence. The system was functionally deaf. In the air, the M31 rockets crossed into Russian airspace in less than 40 seconds, launched from near the atmospheric ceiling. Converging on the S-400, UJ-26 Bober drones, having received the exact GPS coordinates from the electronic warfare team, were making their terminal approach at nap of Earth altitude, too low for the S-400's radar to effectively track, even if it had been online. At other positions, Pantsir and Tor systems were still frantically engaging the remnants of the drone swarm, their operators overwhelmed by the number of contacts. The S-400's radar flickered back online. It detected the new HIMARS salvo beginning its terminal dive. The system began feeding targeting solutions. A Russian officer reached for the alert communications to warn higher command. And right then, a UJ-26 Bober that had been lurking at low altitude made its death dive straight into the command vehicle housing the S-400's radar control center. The Bober's 20-kilogram warhead struck the Gravestone radar array at over 300 kilometers per hour. The radar screen didn't just go dark, it went dead. And in the 28 seconds between radar death and HIMARS impact on the power station, Russian air defense was fighting with 20th century tools in a 21st century war. Every backup sensor was engaged elsewhere. Every interceptor was committed to other threats. The sky above Belgorod's thermal power station was naked, undefended. 6 M31A1 rockets, each carrying a 90-kilogram unitary warhead, 540 kilograms of total explosive power, continued their supersonic dive completely unopposed. Each rocket was programmed with a circular error probable, CEP, of less than 5 meters. GPS guided, inertial navigation backup. These weren't missing. At 18:52 hours and 41 seconds, 6 HIMARS warheads impacted the Belgorod thermal power station's main transformer complex with surgical precision. This wasn't just an explosion. This was an uncontrolled electrical cascade. Each 90-kilogram unitary warhead vaporized tons of copper coils and steel infrastructure in microseconds. High-tension transmission lines snapped like guitar strings. Transformers exploded in sequence, creating a domino effect. A massive electrical arc illuminated the night brighter than noon. The main gas turbine building suffered catastrophic structural damage, confirmed by Russian emergency services. 4. HIMARS. Missiles destroyed the foundation of the building housing the gas turbine units. The main building caught fire. Electricity generation stopped immediately. Then the grid heart stopped beating. Total darkness across large sections of Belgorod Oblast. According to Russian Governor Vyacheslav Gladkov's official statement on October 5th, significant damage to energy facilities across 7 municipalities. Nearly 40,000 residents initially lost power. By October 6th morning, over 5,400 residents in 24 settlements remained without electricity. Scope of work will be significant for repairs. Independent Russian outlet Astra reported more extensive damage. Over 160,000 residents ultimately affected by cascading blackouts. More than 1,800 transformer points at 6 to 10 kilovolts de-energized. 400-plus settlements disconnected to prevent grid overload. Traffic lights, warning systems, and gas stations ceased functioning. But these civilian numbers only tell part of the story. The Belgorod thermal power station wasn't chosen randomly. This facility represented what military strategists call a single point of failure, a critical node whose destruction creates cascading effects far beyond the immediate damage. This plant powered military air defense network. Every S-300 and S-400 radar installation in the region that relied on grid power just went blind. While these systems have backup generators, those generators can't rotate massive radar arrays indefinitely or power complex cooling systems for extended operations. Command and control, Encrypted communication networks in hardened bunkers switched to backup power, but with degraded capacity. Real-time intelligence feeds from forward positions were disrupted. Situational awareness displays went dark. Railway logistics. This is where the real genius appears. Belgorod is a critical junction in Russia's rail network, connecting their industrial heartland to Donbass and Crimea via Rostov. The electrified rail lines running through here depend on electronic signaling systems that prevent collisions, automated switching mechanisms at rail junctions, communication protocols managing train movements, power for electric locomotives on certain lines. When the grid died, this entire network shut down. Ammunition trains, fuel tankers, troop transports, all trapped motionless in Belgorod's darkened rail maze. With 540 kilograms of explosive, Ukraine immobilized tens of thousands of tons of steel and thousands of soldiers without firing a shot at them. Industrial war production. Factories in and around Belgorod that had converted to wartime production, ammunition pressing, vehicle component manufacturing, equipment repair, everything stopped. Modern CNC machines cutting artillery shell casings require stable, high-quality electrical current. Emergency generators can't provide this. Production lines froze mid-cycle. Every hour without power meant hundreds fewer artillery shells produced, dozens fewer armored vehicles repaired, truckloads of ammunition that never reached the firing line. The Institute for the Study of War had previously identified Belgorod Oblast as serving as a vital rear base for Russian operations in eastern Ukraine. The region sustained the main supply and command areas of Russia's 20th Guards Combined Arms Army, the unit responsible for operations in Mariupol, Severodonetsk, and Bakhmut. U.S. intelligence estimates suggested that approximately 40% of ammunition reaching Russian forces in eastern Ukraine transited through Belgorod's rail infrastructure. Ukraine didn't just attack a power plant. They performed strategic surgery on Russia's entire southern logistics network. This operation forced Moscow into a strategic dilemma with no good solutions. After October 5th, Russia had to make a choice: protect the frontline troops or protect critical infrastructure in their own rear areas. They couldn't do both perfectly. Following this strike, Russian military planners were forced to redeploy advanced air defense systems from occupied territory back to shield vulnerable infrastructure inside Russia. Every S-400 or Panzer battery pulled off the front opened new windows for Ukrainian air operations. To defend their own territory, Russia had to make the territory they'd captured more vulnerable. It was a strategic checkmate disguised as a single strike. We must acknowledge the civilian impact. According to intercepted communications released by Ukraine's military intelligence, HUR, a Belgorod Oblast resident described the aftermath. All of Shebekino was without power. The streets were all dark. Traffic lights failed, causing gridlock at intersections. Elevators trapped residents between floors. Hospitals switched to backup generators, but not all medical facilities had adequate backup power. Water pumps serving high-rise apartment blocks went silent. This is the brutal calculus of modern warfare. Ukraine's strategic objective, crippling Russian military logistics, had inevitable civilian consequences. The power station supplied both military and civilian infrastructure. Ukrainian officials have consistently stated they target only facilities with dual-use military applications, avoiding purely civilian targets. But in modern integrated societies, the lines between military and civilian infrastructure blur. War is not clean. It never has been. At 19:07 hours, Russia's defense ministry posted on social media, 230-plus Ukrainian UAVs destroyed, all threats neutralized. The post received tens of thousands of likes within minutes. But at 19:11, just 4 minutes later, Governor Gladkov's panicked assessment leaked through official channels. Critical infrastructure hit, significant power outages, scope of damage still being assessed. Russia's propaganda narrative and reality were suddenly in open war with each other. NASA-firm satellites detected thermal signatures consistent with large fires at the power station. Civilian video showed the horizon glowing orange. Social media exploded with images of darkened streets and traffic chaos. Moscow couldn't hide this one. October 5, 2025, represents something profound in military history. Ukraine proved that modern warfare isn't won exclusively in trenches and tank battles. It's won by identifying your enemy's systemic vulnerabilities and exploiting them with precision and deception. The operation demonstrated several revolutionary concepts. First, electronic warfare as primary weapon system. The first HIMARS salvo existed solely to gather intelligence. $1 million worth of rockets designed to be destroyed, but whose destruction revealed exactly what Ukraine needed to know. Second, integrated multi-domain operations, drones, HIMARS, electronic warfare, and intelligence fusion working as one coordinated system. No single element could have succeeded alone. Third, targeting systemic choke points rather than frontline forces. Why attack soldiers in trenches when you can paralyze the logistics network that feeds them? Fourth, psychological warfare through infrastructure strikes. Russian troops watching their own cities lose power, knowing the ammunition trains aren't coming. That's devastating to morale. Belgorod shattered the doctrine that wars have front lines. A HIMARS launcher positioned in Kharkiv can reach targets that used to be considered safe rear areas. Russian military planners thought they could wage war on Ukrainian soil while keeping their own infrastructure untouchable. October 5th killed that assumption permanently. For Russian soldiers at the front, the message was clear. If their own cities aren't safe, if the factories making their ammunition can be hit, if the trains bringing them supplies can be paralyzed, what exactly are they fighting for? Ukraine didn't just destroy a power plant, they destroyed Russia's myth of strategic depth and defensive invincibility. Put yourself in that Russian S-400 commander's position. When you see 6 ballistic contacts diving at your defensive network at Mach 2.5, you have seconds to decide. Do you engage? Do you wait for confirmation? You engage. You have no choice. Your training demands it. The rules of engagement demand it. The survival of your position demands it. But that's exactly what Ukraine was counting on. Sometimes the most sophisticated military strategy isn't about overwhelming firepower. It's about understanding human psychology, exploiting standard operating procedures, and turning your enemy's own doctrine into a weapon against them. That's not tactics. That's strategic artistry. Drop a comment with your analysis. What would you have done differently if you were commanding Russian air defenses that night? Is there any way they could have avoided this trap? If you found this deep dive into modern military strategy valuable, subscribe for more untold stories where intelligence defeats raw firepower. Next time, how a $50,000 Ukrainian naval drone sank a $65 million Russian landing ship, and the 3 tactical mistakes that made it possible. The surveillance footage will shock you. Hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss it. Analysis based on confirmed reports from Russian Governor Vyacheslav Gladkov, Ukrainian military sources, satellite imagery, and open-source intelligence. While tactical details represent dramatized reconstruction, core facts are verified through multiple sources. Full source list and description.